When you party, you're you're the life of the party. But when you walk alone.
Wow.
You know, somebody asked me the other day, do I have any regrets? Is that a question that's on your mind?
Do you have any regrets? What if you had it all? The fast life, the luxury, and power. Limos, women, dark money at his fingertips, but it all came at a price. Today's guest, Mr. Ken Behr, he wasn't just a drug dealer, he was the kingpin. A man who ruled his empire from the shadows, or so he thought, until everything came crashing down where he faced up to 25 years behind bars. And in a desperate bid for freedom, Ken would do the unthinkable. He made a deal with the very people that was hunting him down, the DEA. From kingpin to now informant, living on top of the world to working with the justice system itself. He also wrote a book called One Step Over the Line, which I have in my iPad right here that I'm currently reading. It's full of his crazy stories of while he was a kingpin, how he did everything, crazy things that he saw and had to do in prison. He explains what might have contributed for him to go into this business, and if he regrets it, he also brings out all the crazy props that he used during his drug dealing days. And of course, at the end, working for the DEA, busting one of the biggest cocaine deals, busting the Italian and Irish mafia. No further ado, here is Ken Behr. How do you want to dive into this? Like, I'm also new to it.
As a kid, I was raised in Wayne, New Jersey, similar to upstate New York, and then it was farmland. My parents were German immigrants that had come here in 1939 to run from the Nazis in war-torn Europe. And we were raised to do the right thing in America, you know, work hard. At an early age, it turned out I had profound dyslexia, and nobody knew what it was, so I failed first grade. My wife is an expert in early child development, and she'll tell you that kids that have trouble in preschool or pre-K and first grade, there's a direct link to prison. I was a good kid. I never got in trouble. And then we moved to New Orleans in 1969. So I moved from the Norman Rockwell farm life of this quiet little community into the deep South's Sodom and Gomorrah. And people may not know New Orleans, and again, it was 1969, free love, Woodstock, the age of Aquarius, you know, and I landed there. Marijuana and drugs had exploded right at the same time my father passed away. Mm-hmm. So now I'm a 13-year-old kid hitting the streets of New Orleans at the time of this explosion of rock and roll and concerts and music. And, you know, I started experimenting with marijuana. The next thing I did was, and the younger guys and gals won't understand this, but a four-way hit of Orange Sunshine, which was acid. So I went from smoking a joint to eating acid, and a very powerful drug. You'd be high for 8 hours on a quarter hit of acid. It's not like it is today, where you go to a dispensary and you have a legal license, you have a legal right to do it. If you got caught with a joint, you had to sell a joint to buy a joint. I mean, there was an underground trade. And if you just by smoking a joint, you were an enemy of society. And at the time, you know, politicians were using marijuana and drugs as a way to market themselves to the public. And so there was, I mean, we all know now that marijuana is basically harmless once you're over 18 or not. You know, you should wait till you're brain's matured, but it's just like alcohol. It's certainly less harmful. But back then it was the villain. They villainized it. And in 1973, my mother was a widower, and she wanted to move to Florida to get us away from the drugs and the crime. Well, in 1973 was the explosion of the marijuana and the drug wars. I was 16 years old, and all of a sudden people were talking about marijuana in a much different way. And what it was is Florida was the importation location for most of the drugs that came from Central and South America. Mm-hmm. Drugs would come in through Mexico into California, but Mexican pot wasn't really good. Colombian pot was really good. Some of the Jamaican pot was really good. And the closest South American country to South Florida, or the tip of America, is Colombia. So the ships and the planes could easily get to Fort Lauderdale. As a young kid, I started selling drugs in high school. Me and my younger brother, we did good. You know, we were really good entrepreneurs. I mean, we were, you know, working the business, and everybody was buying a little bit of Coke from us, a little bit of pot from us, you know, Quaaludes, which were popular back then. And we were little entrepreneurs. And the name of my book is called One Step Over the Line, because at some point, right about in my 20s, I realized, how the hell did I get into all this? And I realized that somewhere along the line, I had taken one step over the line. What I didn't realize until I finished writing the book was my big mistake was not quitting. Like most of us, when they got to be 18, they went to college, they got jobs. I kept selling drugs. So my failure in the end, my introspective realization is that I forgot to take two steps back and quit. Right about 18, I was selling drugs in high school, going to school. I had summer jobs. I ran into a good friend of mine had introduced me to a business partner of his father. And my good friend, Frankie Monteleone was his name. He's one of the wealthiest people at the family. They own a big hotel in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And he was my best friend, and his father buying and selling yachts to this guy, Sandy Perkoff. Sandy kind of took me under his wing. If my dad taught me how right it was to be good, Sandy taught me how good wrong could be. My dad was teaching me right from wrong. Sandy was teaching me how good wrong could be. And I was working for him, and he was selling boats to smugglers. So the next thing I know, I'm about 18 years old. I'm in a Learjet with a suitcase full of $1,500,000. And I'm flying to the Cayman Islands to smuggle it out of the country to put it in to use to buy boats and planes for one of the biggest smuggling organizations in the world.
Wow.
This guy, Donnie Steinberg, and the feds named it Marijuana Inc. At one time, I took the trip with my girlfriend. And when I used to go with Sandy, they'd supply a bottle of champagne, a bottle of Dom Perignon. So me and my girlfriend were 18. They go, would you care for a bottle of Dom Perignon? And we're like, sure. And I just started growing more, building my own drug organization and working for the big smugglers.
Did you not feel like the consequence of being scared of doing all of this? Or was there something in your brain that was like, no, like I can't do this?
Well, two things. I used to race cars. There's a picture of me in one of my race cars. And one of the things that racing cars and drug runners have in common is you don't think it's going to happen to you. You're not going to get in an accident. You're not going to get caught. But we were also, by the time I was a kid, I was trained. If you get arrested, don't say anything. It's kind of like, like the movies with the mob and the kids, that are coming up. We were kind of trained to be criminals just out of surroundings, out of environment, right? And our environment was this drug war. Everybody in high school was selling drugs. I had a lot of friends that died in plane crashes in Colombia, even as early as, before they were 20. It just kind of was part of the lexicon of our life, kind of the language that we all lived in and spoke. Yeah, and I guess I like the excitement. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I developed a couple techniques that I used to make a lot of money. Another friend of mine in high school had moved to Ohio when Florida had a housing collapse in the 70s, 78. He calls me one day, and now I'm in Florida and I have the access to marijuana. He says, hey, he's working for the Ford plant. He goes, hey, I think I can sell some marijuana up here. I said, I'll tell you what, if you want to come get it, I'll give you a couple pounds. At one point, when we were living in my mom's house, my mother found 4 pounds of marijuana in one of the closets. That's a lot of pot. She flushed all 4 pounds down the toilet. It took her all day. And when we had to make that up, we had to go make more money to cover the loss. Terry, my friend, says, hey, so he jumps in his car and he drives the 19 hours to South Florida. He had a black Trans Am. I give him the 2 pounds. He leaves 19 hours each way. He had like a 3-day weekend. Calls me up. He goes, I sold that. I said, well, you know what? I just got a bail from Donnie Steinberg, from the big smuggler. I got one. I think I can grab a bail. Why don't you come down and I'll give you the bail? So he gets back in the Trans Am. An average bale of pot, just so you guys know, is about 45, 50 pounds. So it's like the size of 2 big suitcases. It didn't fit in the trunk. So we're in the front of my house in the middle of the street trying to put a 50-pound bale in the back of his car. Well, we figured it out. We got it in. He goes home, calls me back and goes, I sold it. And that was the start of one of my biggest money-making and longest-running programs, where it went on for 12 years where we were running pot. At some points, we had 3 cars going at the same time. But that would be 1,000 to 1,200 pounds. We'd have to go out and rent cars because we didn't own enough. I owned 3 or 4 cars. So we'd have to go to the rent-a-car company and rent more cars. A pound of marijuana at that time in Florida was about $240 to $245 a pound. If somebody wanted to buy 1,000 pounds from me, and they did, I'd sell 1,000 pounds at a time sometimes. I could only make $5 because the market was so tight in Florida. Everybody was doing it, and everybody knew somebody that knew somebody. But when I moved it up to Ohio, it got to the point where I could make $40 a pound. So I could buy 1,000 pounds of marijuana for $250,000, put down about 80,000. You know, I didn't have to pay all up front because I had credit, I had good reputation. Ship it up and make $40,000, and that's in 1980. So in today's dollars, you're probably talking 700. It's $1 million. That's how I got busted the second time, and that's when I got charged with racketeering, running an ongoing criminal enterprise, and they wanted to charge me with 25 years in prison.
So were you they call you the kingpin or the smuggler? You did everything, or?
Well, here's the thing. We said how much you don't want to get caught. Smuggling to me was like kind of stupid because although you made a lot of money and a lot of my friends were smugglers, you didn't have control. There's so many variables. In my operation to Ohio, all I needed to do was find weed in Florida from somebody I knew, maybe somebody I went to high school with, not step out of the group that we all knew, send it up to Ohio. I wasn't driving it. I hired drivers to run it. Now I did drive it, but eventually I stepped away from that role and I was safe. I wasn't doing the dealing. Doesn't mean I still didn't want to I didn't get hooked up in some smuggling deals. What happened to me, my first smuggling trip, I was 19 years old. I had to leave the country. Sandy, who was my bad dad, said, why don't you go to Jamaica? I have a friend that has a place down there. You can hang out, try out, and stay on the high, stay down low, right? So I went down there for 6 or 7 months. My friend, one of my drug dealing friends, and another one of my friends who was a pilot and also a smuggler, came down to visit. And I said, I've been here 7 months. It's got, it's kind of cool being 19 and leaving Florida or leaving your home and going out. A lot of people go to Europe for a year, after high school or college, they feel the world out before they go to. So I went to Jamaica on the run. I was hiding from Interpol, and the police. And next thing we know, we start talking about doing a smuggling gig. My one friend had a pilot, had a plane and a runway, a secluded runway. So we each put up some money. I left Jamaica in a hurry. I didn't tell anybody because you don't want anybody to know. If they knew I was leaving and the other guys were leaving, we don't want the other smuggling groups to know what we're doing, right? We headed out and I smuggled my first load of drugs at 19, 600 pounds of Jamaican weed.
So on a private plane?
Yeah, he put it in the back of the plane, sneak out at night. You landed, at night, and then get out of the island and then land in a secluded, Florida's loaded with roads to nowhere. This guy actually had a private runway that he had bought a piece into. Wow. You could be sitting at a restaurant on the water in Jamaica, and at any time in the middle of the night, you'd hear a plane. 20 minutes later, it's back. This is actually a piece of the bale from that first trip. The bale's this is what a one bale of marijuana, so it might have 40, 50 pounds, big, like a suitcase full of marijuana. Only this is, see, it says Shell, Kingston, Jamaica. So this is the burlap. The pot would have been inside this. Only this is the inside, probably. See the duct tape? This was another favorite tool of every smuggler. Lots of duct tape, because you want to wrap the bales up tight so they don't break open. There's another trick that sometimes we landed that first trip on a runway, but a lot of times we would just throw it out of the plane into the water. So what you do then is, or on the ground, but the plane comes down low over the water, and we used to get away with that before the feds got really smarter. Throw it out, and there'd be boats waiting for it. So what we would do is we'd have to put these on it, glow sticks, right? How are you going to find the bale in the ocean? We would tie a bunch of them to the bale, and then there'd be a kicker in the back of the plane. Remember, they take the seats out, and the kicker would kick the bales out, and then speedboats would pick them up in the water. So it wasn't uncommon to be a local Floridian to go to the beach and find bales on the boat because somebody had kicked one out and missed one. That was the first smuggling trip I did.
But why only marijuana? Have you done like cocaine and other smuggling?
Funny you should say that. I did do cocaine. I was selling cocaine in high school. I was selling cocaine the whole time. When the war on drugs got harder and harder, when Reagan back then, and they started crushing the marijuana, the Colombians went to cocaine, more profitable and smaller. more, easier to smuggle. I mean, I say in the book, if you think about it, in 1973, Nixon started the war on drugs, and then Reagan amplified it in the 80s. In 1933, we had Prohibition. And what happened with Prohibition? Al Capone, blood in the streets, people going to speakeasies. The mob would have never built Vegas to what it was if it wasn't for Prohibition. The mob never made the kind of money they made it when they started making money selling liquor. And that's what built Vegas, that the profits from all that. That's the problem. When the government tries to tell people what they can watch, what they can't watch, or what they can have, it builds a black market. So I don't understand how they couldn't have known that if they tried to stop people from smoking marijuana, recreational drugs, they're not killing anybody. It wasn't going to be this explosion of a black market, and then more Al Capones in the street, more blood in the street. In the 80s in Miami, when the cocaine wars, went crazy, there was killings in the street. There was, I mean, machine gunning of people. If they never would have done that, would we have gotten to that point, right? So I'll tell you a couple cocaine smuggling stories since you asked. In the 80s, it started to get harder to bring drugs in. They had radar planes. They had blimps in the air. They know that if you're coming from the Bahamas, Colombia, Jamaica, the plane's probably loaded. One of my friends I went to high school with, another guy, all Hollywood, all grew up in South Florida. They want to do a small truck smuggling trip. He's got like 2 duffel bags full of coke. Maybe it's 80 kilos, 40 kilos, which is a lot of coke, but to us, it's, not a big trip. And he's going to fly it out of the Bahamas, not out of Colombia. So he's paying probably a little premium because it's already in the Bahamas. So what the pilot does is, in a small single engine plane, he comes in like he's going to land in Fort Lauderdale or Miami Airport. And any pilot has the right to call off the landing. Echo Bravo, this is Foxtrot, whatever. I'd like to go around. He doesn't feel comfortable landing. The tower says, okay. Rarely are you denied a go around because they don't want you to crash. If you're the pilot, you don't feel comfortable. Well, what we did was right on the other side of the airport's runways, just past the highway, was a golf course called Oak Ridge. I lived about a mile and a half. So what we did was we were in my house, the 4 of us, 2 guys we dropped off in the golf course in the woods with all black, flashlights, knives, and my one friend in his Mercedes, and me in a pickup truck. We sat parked on the outside. The plane came in, and again, they kicked the cocaine out of the plane. So the pilot tells the kicker, kick it. The duffel bags have these on it. When that happens, by the way, the guy waiting to catch the package isn't sitting out in the middle of the golf course going, because, the package is coming in at about 200 miles an hour, weighs like 50 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have to lean up against a tree, and even then, it'll break branches coming in. You can still get hit in the head with a tree, with a tree or something. Just as we do it, it works perfectly. I come down the street in the pickup truck. My friend comes running out with one of the duffel bags, throws it in the back of the truck. He jumps in the back and yells, "Hit it!" I give it the gas. Now, luckily, in those days, things were a little quieter in those neighborhoods, but it's still really quiet today. And so I hit it, and on the other side of the golf course, my other friend with his Mercedes and his brother, who did the other catch, and they get in that car. We both drive the mile and a half to my house. We pull into the house. We pull the duffel bags in. I get a knife out of the kitchen drawer. We cut them open, get out the kilos, cut out the kilos. I grab a couple plastic bags, throw some grams in it, some head stash. We look at each other and we go, we got to get out of here. Not because we were being chased by the police. We had tickets to an Eddie Murphy concert. I'm basically helping out. This wasn't, I did this. I don't even know why. I think I did it for fun. You got tickets to Eddie Murphy? He goes, yeah, we got 4 tickets. I go, what time does it? He goes, the show starts in 15 minutes. Let's go. We take the duffel bags out of my house, strip them out, put it in suitcases, put it in the trunk of his Mercedes, and we all go to the Eddie Murphy concert here in Florida, which is, that was the, he's got on these red leather and he's prancing around. Nathan, who owns the load, looks at me and goes, "You think we should go?" And I go, "Well, this show is great, but you kind of left $1 million worth of cocaine sitting in the back of your, in front of my house. So that was one of the cocaine trips. I'll tell you a marijuana story. Everybody's known everybody from high school. Kelly knows Lee, who knows Nathan, who knows Terry, who's my partner in Ohio. So we all kind of work in and out together, right? So Kelly tells me he's going to smuggle a load of weed out of Jamaica. And I'm thinking, buddy, I lived in Jamaica. It isn't that easy. I mean, just fuel. I saw a truck driving down the street with a 50-gallon drum of fuel in it when I was a kid. The police pulled it over. They told the guys to unload the drum into the police's truck. The thing weighs like 300 pounds, so it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And then once they got it in there, they arrested them all, because and then they're going to sell the fuel. Clean fuel, aviation fuel is imperative. If there's water in it, the plane will crash if there's any debris in it. So I said, Kelly, do you know what you're doing in Jamaica? He says, his Uncle Ralph, who's like 65. So kind of like my age right now, goes, yeah, he's going to go down. He's the pilot. He's got a twin engine plane. So I said, I talked to Uncle Ralph. I said, Ralph, have you ever done this before? He goes, no. And I had done other things. I go, no, Ralph, smuggling a load is not easy. I said, get a co-pilot, at least go with somebody. He goes, no, I'm going to do it myself. He literally flies from Tampa, Florida down to Haiti, loads up on fuel in Haiti because you special wing tanks and, you have to have extra fuel built into the plane. The standard plane won't make that long a trip, right? He flies down to Jamaica, gets the load, heads back for America. And I tried to tell Kelly and Uncle Ralph, we have to use a clandestine landing strip, something in the middle of nowhere. Well, the problem was the fuel range they were worried about making it to a clandestine airstrip and then getting back to a regular airstrip. And now you're taking the seats out of the plane, which is very suspect, right? If someone looks in and goes, where's your seats? But not horrible because people use the planes for cargo use. It's not unusual to take the seats out if you're going to do cargo, but not the norm, right? Mm-hmm. More of an inclination that you probably just did something illegal. So Uncle Ralph makes the trip and they're going to land it where? At the hangar where he keeps his plane in St. Pete, Florida, downtown St. Pete, like right on the beach, right in the middle of the city. And at this time, it was later in the chronological time in mid 80s when, it was a lot harder. Like not when I was a kid. Uncle Ralph lands the plane and the offload crew, which was two guys from high school, back up a pickup truck and unload the plane. And your adrenaline is going so fast. Like I've unloaded boats before and stuff. And like you're doing it, they're 40, 50-pound bales. And you're throwing them like they're pillows. Boom, wow. Boom, boom. You can unload 1,000 pounds in 3 minutes. So that happens. And I am sitting at a hotel with a pair of binoculars trying to watch everything with a radio. I'm not, I have $20,000 in the hotel room as backup cash for an event. And again, remember, in 1985, 20,000, like 50 grand. We had a getaway car on the downstairs with the keys under the mat parked up. So in case somebody had in trouble, one of us could take the getaway car. But we had the rest of the drivers, the guys that were going to drive the loads to Ohio, to my partner, in a hotel stashed on the outside of town. And they were none too happy about it. Like, why are we in these little, dive hotels? I look down and I see Uncle Ralph had this old Volvo, like the most conservative car you could, like in TV commercials, they have them all the time to show that people are old and conservative. And it's flying down the street going airborne. And every time it lands, sparks are flying out underneath it. He's got to be doing 7. It probably only does 80. And behind the Volvo's 5 cop cars. And they all, it's like a full-on police chase. Lights going, all the cars going airborne. The DEA had followed the plane in, or customs. They had him on the radar the whole time. Uncle Ralph, who's never done a smuggling trip before, and as naive as he could be, he has no way to leave. They just took his car. That was the car that was parked next to the hangar. He gets in the pickup truck and drives it with the 1,100 pounds out the back of the airport. And all the cops had chased the little car. I'm sitting in a hotel and we're thinking that Uncle Ralph, the plane, the load, Lee, and our friend Scotty, all friends from high school. And Scotty had never done a drug deal in his life. We recruited him to do an offload. The cops chased the Volvo. Uncle Ralph, not knowing any better, or maybe because he had to get out of there, drove the whole load of weed out and took it to the stash house. So we get a phone call. We're sitting there and really sullen, like, man, it's bad. Your friends are going to do 3 to 5 years, more. And we got away with the whole trip. Took the weed to Ohio and sold it, made all the money. The
Wow.
cops never, and Uncle Ralph had his, since it was right in his own place where he kept it, stored his thing, the DEA stickers, they put stickers on the plane, don't, DEA, don't open the doors. But the little back door in the back where the luggage goes, they never stickered it. So the guys at the airport just went in, cleaned the whole plane out, vacuumed everything out. So we got away with that one. I call that one. I think I call that one the one that got away in the book. But we did do one where we smuggled in 300 kilos into a road to nowhere. Same guys that I did the 80 kilos with, or that trip. And I don't know, I did it. I didn't need to do those, sit on a runway and catch a bunch of cocaine and make 20,000 for a night's work. I had my own gigs, but 20,000 is a lot of money, and I was racing cars. So 20,000 would cover a couple weekends. I would spend 6,000 to 10,000 a weekend racing cars.
Wow.
Yeah. So we go out at a bar sometimes and buy champagne and party and spend, 7,000 to 10,000 a night. Anyway, so we brought this load into a road to nowhere, just a dead road in the middle of Florida. And I talk about it in the book. It's a very exciting story. We landed it, 300 kilos. I'll show you what we did there. You take these, here's the glow sticks again, right? Now they were longer than this. So this is just a smaller version to show you. But we put those in the middle of the road. Remember, it's pitch black. We then take, this is a special, if you fall overboard, this is a Marine, turn this on, it's a strobe. It'll boom, boom, boom. As the plane came around and the radio us, they're hitting us, go, go, go. And me and my other friend are building this runway while another guy's on the radio and another guy's with a machine gun and, guarding the road. Wow. The pilot says to the co-pilot, look, it's Miami International and I know customs. And you have to imagine what it's like being in the plane, pitch black, and all of a sudden, boom, lights, a full-on runway. Mm-hmm. The plane lands, I grab one of the cars, I drive over there and I load it up with, we take the 300 keys, get out. The rest of the crew has to refill the plane with some fuel. We have a 50-gallon drum. And the way they did that was inside the plane, they had plastic jugs full of fuel. So imagine you're taking off in an airplane with 300 kilos of coke, which is almost 700 pounds. You've got a pilot and co-pilot, another 300 or 400 pounds. The fuel, which could be another 1,000 pounds. They would do is they'd fly in the middle of the night when the engine started sputtering, they're running out of fuel. They had the fuel lines coming from outside into rubber hoses, into sticks, like, little brass rods. And they just put them into another open can of, 30-gallon jug of fuel. And then when that runs out, so there was 6 jugs. When the plane landed, we got the coke out. Then we got to get the drums out. We can't have the plane go back to an airport with that stuff in it. Take those, break down the radio. We had radios in the woods and, all the communication stuff. We're all armed. And we were all high for days on speed, which was, none of this is stuff that Ken Behr likes to, this isn't my style. But for some reason, I went along with the guys.
Are you armed for the police or?
Yeah, well, or police or other drug runners. And, it's stupid because we're not going to kill anybody. I can't imagine, thank God, nobody ever got shot or nothing ever happened. I mean, and we had a lot of armament. We had machine guns, hand grenades. I mean, we had, we were trading, one of my friends was trading an Army Special Forces cocaine for weapons. We literally had hand grenades, Laws rockets, claymores. These are things that they're using in Ukraine right now. Lord knows why I got involved, but I did. Probably because of the thrill and, shit, geez, everybody else is doing it. So about 6 weeks later, we go to do it again. And we're in the woods. We're all in our same positions. You're in the swamps. I mean, I remember one time, one of the guys says, I think an alligator just ate a duck. And you hear this blood, and, wow. And I'm like, we're leaned up against trees so that nothing can come from behind you with guns, pistols. And I'm like, and the plane never made it. He crashed in Colombia. 300 kilos of coke, 600 gallons of fuel. And my good friend Nathan and the co-pilot died in the plane crash.
Like an accident
They
crash.
just didn't take off. When you're on a dirt runway and you have all this weight, the coke, the fuel, and something happened. I wasn't there, but the runways, clandestine runways that you take off and land in, they're not like Miami International Airport. They're dirt, or they're short. You know, you have to be a really. I've been on in planes with pilots practicing landing on short as you can. Yeah, I lost a good friend that day. You know, and that's the thing about the drug wars. You know, it's not easy. People, I'm not saying suggesting anybody understands, but I'm just saying, what if they never had the drug wars? How many people would still be alive? How much, it's a cause and effect, right? You have inner city youth. I've spent black and brown kids that go to jail for small amounts of drugs. There's a whole, I'm not trying to glorify anything. I mean, it is kind of sexy and cool. It's my story, but I got to race cars, fly around in Lear jets, hang out in cigarette boats. The first time I got busted was in 1988. Are you digging on this?
No, I love this. I feel like you've lived GTA life.
My ex-wife and I were getting a divorce, and what does my ex-wife do? She tells my daughter, who's in middle school or something, that your dad was a drug smuggler, a drug dealer. And you know what she says? Oh man, my dad's a G-man. He's cool. She goes, I'm going to school and tell all my friends. I'm like, no, 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 no. So anyway, a friend of ours had smuggled 40,000 pounds into Canada. That's a pretty big load. It's not, I have friends that smuggled hundreds of thousands of pounds. One of my friends I work with in the DEA brought the largest load I think in history to America, 335,000 pounds. So, but 40,000 is a good lick. It's stuck in Canada and he can't sell it. What he fails to tell us is he can't sell it because it's terrible. It doesn't get you high. What most people don't know is that the female plant gets you high, the male plant does nothing. Or hemp, hemp doesn't get you high, but cannabis does, right? CBD doesn't get you high. So whatever he had in Canada was not feminized, as we call it, marijuana. And if the male growing it, if the male gets too close to the female, it destroys it. It turns it male. So my other friend, the same guy that like 12 years earlier had done the load out of Jamaica with the 600 pounds, comes to me and goes, hey, Kenny, you want to do a trip out of Canada? Bruce, who I knew, has 40,000 pounds stuffed up there that he needs to bring back to America. And then why don't you help me smuggle it in and you can sell it? So I'm going to bring it to Ohio to my partner. So Bob now doesn't have that big workhorse of a plane. He's got a seaplane. And what we do is we put the weed in the seaplane in Canada on a lake, fly it into Maine and unload it from the seaplane. The thing about a seaplane is, it only holds a couple hundred pounds, and you can't do it at night. You can't land a seaplane on the water. You can't see. You can't see the shape. You can't see how rough the water is, and there's no way to build a runway. You can't go run the lights out in the ocean. You can't, you could in an emergency, but not if you're trying to get away with a crime. So we ended up doing 6 or 7 trips. The plane lands in the middle of the day. I go out, the plane pulls up, I unload the weed, put it in a pickup truck, drive it to a stash house in Maine. And we did that. I took the weed, tried to sell it into all my markets, would not sell. So the guys, now we have 1,400 pounds of weed in a warehouse in Maine. And they go, Kenny, why don't you go up, get the weed, bring it to DC, to Washington, DC, where we can, I think maybe we can sell it there. I go, buddy, nobody's buying this weed. You're wasting your time. You're paying me. I'll go up, rent a truck, and bring it down. I don't want to do this whole trip. I mean, I pay people to do this, but I'm in the middle of the smuggling group. I can't really bring anybody in. So I called one of my longtime drivers, this guy, I used to call him number one. And he'd already retired out of the business. He got a legal job in upstate New York. He was working. He was on his way to moving on. Everybody's trying to get out of business. Nobody wants, we all want to end this. I call him up. I go, Rick, I need your help. I need you to help me drive a truck from Maine to DC. And now he's been working. He's going to fly home and spend 2 weeks with his family in Florida for the Christmas vacation. Right? No, July 4th. And that's another thing. I always told myself, never work on a holiday or your birthday. Why? Because if you get busted, It's going to ruin your birthday and it's going to ruin the holiday every year coming forward. Like, instead of firing, waving flags and having fireworks, you're going to go, that's the weekend I got busted.
Wow.
So what do? I go against my grain and and I say, okay, guys, I'm a team player. I'll go up, load a truck, I'll rent a U-Haul, bring it down. I call Rick. I said, Rick, meet me I'll pick you up at the airport in Maine. He doesn't want to do it. I said, I'll tell you what, how I used to pay you $1,000 a run? I'll pay you $2,000 a run. I'll fly you home. I'll pay for all your trip so that you can be home in time with your family, all expense paid. I'll pay you the $2,000 and pay for all your plane tickets, cab fare, food, everything. I talked him into it. And boy, did I screw up his life. We're driving down the street and a police comes behind us and pulls us over. It turns out that in New Hampshire, they were selling fireworks. Now we're going from Maine to New York. And then I was going to get out in New York, go see my brother who lives in Manhattan, and he was going to go the rest of the way. So we made it through Maine, New Hampshire. We're in Massachusetts. Turns out they're selling fireworks in New Hampshire, but it's illegal to have them in Massachusetts. Aha! Why you don't work on a holiday, right? Because extra police looking for fireworks. The guy pulls us over, says, open the truck. I say, no. He puts a gun to me.
Wow.
He pulls his gun out, and I go, oh, shit. And Rick's in the front seat. And I know when he hears that door open, I have everything boxed up in U-Haul boxes, taped up. I have it plastic wrapped. I have fabric softener and bounce carpet fresh. That's what we used to use to hide the smell. So we'd wrap it in bounce and then spray carpet. The cop goes, what is this? He's like, cuts it open, sees the marijuana, thinks it's fireworks, arrests us. End up spending 5 days on the whole holiday in a cell on the side of the highway, because with drunks and everything. I get to go to court and I tell Ricky, Rick, please, number one, don't stick with me. Don't rat me out. Don't say, they don't know I smuggled it in. I got to make it look like we're just a couple guys that, got asked to drive a truck. We get taken to this holding cell. We're there. And then I go to court, and the trick is not to make it sound like you have any money. They say, well, your bond's going to be $40,000 a piece, $80,000. I could have scraped it up, but you don't want to do that, because once they see that, they know you're Mr. Big. So I say, no, I don't have the money. But I said, I have a AAA card, the driver's club. Yeah. The judge goes, son, I don't think that's what they had in mind when they offered, they offer you a bond, I guess, if you get in trouble with a traffic ticket. We get taken to this jail, and I'm telling you, it was called Lawrence House of Detention, and it was one of the hellholes on earth. It was built in 1860. The place had just got flushing toilets. You used to have to poop and pee in a bucket and walk it down the hall. And it was just, there was no heat. It was the hottest summer since the time they had built I researched it, since 1860. They separate me and Ricky, and it's hard. It's really, one day I'm sitting in my cell, and my cellmate was this guy, Jose. He was the toughest guy on the cell block, and he was good. I mean, we got along good because we were both, respect for each other. And I was pretty tough back then, like physically strong from all the jet skiing I was doing. There's no clothes. I mean, there's no prison uniform. My brother had to bring me clothes down.
Wow.
I don't remember ever seeing a shower. So they're throwing matches from the top tier down to the bottom tier where we are, to the floor, because the more you go up, the hotter it is, trying to set the 50-gallon drums on fire to burn the prison down, because they figure if they burn it down, the guards will come and take us outside. So one time they brought in this Gatorade, and there's no cups. And I'll show you something. This kid, there's a Pepsi can in the garbage. I don't know who got a Pepsi. The kid takes the can and he rubs it on the bars over and over and over and over and over and over, cuts the lid off. So now it's a cup. And he goes, here you go get something cold to drink.
Wow.
And I've saved this. I mean, you can see how old it is. It's 30 years old.
Wow. You still have that?
Yeah, I save it. And one thing you'll find in jail, and no matter how, there's a lot of dangerous people. Listen, but people are trying to help one another. People understand that we're all under duress. The pain you see. Jose, my cellmate, had stabbed his pregnant wife 7 times in her stomach. They had like 6 kids. He looks at me and goes, hey, man, when I get out of here, we're going to be a family again. He didn't kill the baby or his wife, but I'm thinking, man, Jose, she's really understanding. You know, we ended up beating the case. We went to court. I hired good lawyers. I did cost me $80,000 to bond out. Didn't get away
Wow.
with that. There's some other really dark things that happen that I'm not going to. You have to read the book, you know. But you know, I don't want to go into. But one of the things that that we got out of it was because the cop pulled the gun on me. They called it illegal search and seizure. He didn't have the right to you know, threaten me. But the funny thing is, the prosecutor, I got tried in the smallest working courthouse in America. It's in Salem, Massachusetts, where they burned the witches. Lawyer goes, you have to get up and testify everything you did. You loaded the truck. You put the weed in it. This is about evidentiary hearing. It's illegal search. Tell the truth. Do not lie. She said, oh, by the way, this is a tourist attraction. So at noon, you might find a group of tourists coming through, checking out where the Salem witches got tried. And I'm on the witness stand testifying for my life. And there's a tour group. And I'm like, you know, the lawyer's like, don't pay attention. So, yeah, so that was kind of funny. The judge ruled in our favor. But one of the funny things, the prosecutor says, so, Mr. Behr, did you put the bounce in the pot? I said, yep, I wrapped the bales in. She goes, and did you put this this carpet soft, you know, the carpet fresh? I go, yep. She pulls out a big jar of it and goes, is this the stuff? And I go, it looks like it. I'm not sure. She dumps it on a piece, like a manila, you know, folder, you know, whatever, legal files. And if you've ever opened up carpet fresh, it smells up the. She ended up getting it all over her. She had it on her blouse. She had it on her. It went everywhere. The whole courtroom stunk of carpet fresh. And I think that's the other thing. The judge looked at it and said, there's no way this guy smelled pot on a rainy night in a 30-foot truck, because I rented, you know, I didn't need that big a truck, but I just got the one I could get. You know, the cop was lying, and the judge knew it. And he illegally searched me, put a gun to me. I mean, that's how I beat the case. So sadly, I beat the case because I didn't quit. As a matter of fact, my friend Bob, the guy with the plane that we had done the load, had smuggled in a load of coke, and he had it in Washington, D.C., where he had grown up. And I would literally fly up, because the thing about court cases is when you'll see them in some famous cases going on in the news, some political stuff, and whatnot. The longer you can, they go on for years. The longer you can stretch, you have the money to pay a lawyer, and you're not an inner city black or brown kid, and you can stall years. The prosecutors change everything, you know, it gets stale. And that's the trick. You know, you have the money, so we stall for years in drug cases. And that's why lawyers like drug dealers, because they have money, right? Good clients. And they're looking at a lot of time. Perfect for every lawyer. You got a suitcase full of cash, you're looking at a lot of time. We beat that case. And, but I was literally flying up to DC. Bob had set up 2 lockers and a self-storage. One had the coke, one for the money. I go there, unlock the one lock, combination lock, pull out 2 or 3 kilos, sell them to my guys, have them show up, spread the coke out to my runners. And I was literally selling kilos of cocaine while out on bond for the 1,400 pounds of coke.
It didn't click in you like, oh no, I shouldn't be doing that, or.
Well, I needed the money to pay for the lawyers and for my life. And I said to Bob, I said, you know what's going to happen to me if I get caught? I'm already out on bond. That my lawyer said to me, he goes, you guys beat the case because it was pot. If it had been 1 ounce of coke, you would have went to jail. The judge would have not ruled in your favor. In the end, though, I got busted in Ohio. Finally, I got married. I had a 1.5-year-old daughter. My wife and I had to put on a big wedding, you know, a drug dealer wedding, 40, 50 grand at the time, you know, took my wife to Aspen, you know, Santa Fe, we spent all the money. Come back, and I looked at my wife. I said, I got to go back to work. My wife
Did she know you were doing this?
Yeah. You know, sadly, a lot of the drug dealers' girlfriends or wives they're there for the cocaine, the limos, and the parties. You know, but when you get busted, they don't really. It's hard to stick around. You know, I mean, especially if you're looking at 25 years, right? When you party, you're the life of the party. But when you walk alone. You know, when you go out that door, and usually somebody's shoe hits you in the back of the head. There's not a
Mhm.
lot of people, you know. So I sold my car. We went on our honeymoon. I came back. I had a drug truck. I had a specially built truck that had secret compartments. I flew out to Texas. I sent the truck out with my driver, one of my other drivers, Paco, picked up a load of pot in Texas and drove it to Ohio. And I didn't know it at the time, but my partner up there, who had 4 kids, had gotten busted. And he was turning me in. And I had just gotten married. He was at my wedding. I had a 1.5-year-old baby. And I would never forget this is my first wife said, don't go. Don't go. I'll eat white bread and bologna sandwiches. We'll get a job. I'll get a job. You'll get a job. We have a baby. We just got married. And I got busted and I got charged with racketeering, running an ongoing criminal enterprise. That's 25 minimum mandatory. One of the reasons they did that was my friend Kelly, who had brought that load of weed in with me on the road that his Uncle Ralph got away with, had done another trip and got busted for cocaine and left the country on the run. They also arrested him. Unbeknownst to me, he was also bringing marijuana into my partners. I didn't know about that. Obviously, I wouldn't have wanted to be involved with the two, both things going on. So they're going to hit me with 25 years. No woman, I would think, dreams about being a little girl playing with Barbies and getting married, and then thinks their husband's going to be a convicted felon 2 weeks after the wedding, and that she's going to go through life without a man and without someone to protect their child, right? Because that's the mother's nature, inherent nature. So my marriage was destroyed. I spent 3 months in Ohio jail trying to get bond. I finally made bond. I wasn't talking. Everybody else had ratted. 17 people had ratted me out.
Wow.
And they came to me the day they arrested me in a hotel room, threw me down on the ground, and they said, listen, you better talk and talk now. But you see, we knew better. As I was trained as a kid, don't say a word. Wait until you get a lawyer. Don't say a word. You're not going to make a deal there. You're not going to do your best good. Even if it takes you years, even if you have to spend years in jail, don't say a word. And I didn't. The prosecutor's got his finger in his face and go, buddy, you got the wrong guy. Now, I knew he had the right guy. I was the boss of this whole thing, but I just wasn't doing it. And it's the only reason that I never went to jail. That and the fact that I agreed to work for the DEA.
Is there a particular person that gets picked to work for the DA and nobody else does? Like, did you have something special that they wanted?
Well, so here's what happened. I was in jail, and the guy in the cell next to me had done 15 years in Angola prison, one of the worst prisons on earth. Amnesty International calls it one of the worst prisons in the world. And he was lucid white skin, prison tattoos, and he would they wouldn't let him out of his area. So I would go to the library and he'd go, get me this book, like Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur Court was one of them, which was a great book. I read it. He would read it in a day. The book's this thick. I mean, his mind was amazing. And he says to me, listen, you have a 1.5-year-old daughter. I said, yeah. He goes, take a look around this jail. You see all these people? It's not who hasn't ratted. It's who hasn't ratted yet. He said, the mores and values that you're clinging to died a lifetime ago. He goes, in the other pod, your co-defendant, he's already ratted. In the other pod, because they separate us, he's going to rat. He goes, you know how many times I've seen my daughter? I said, no. He goes, once in 15 years. He goes, do yourself a favor. He goes, make a decision to change your life and then cooperate. He goes, and if you change your life and you do it for your daughter and you do it for your family, you're not being a rat, and that's good. If you do rat and you do cooperate and you ever go back to selling drugs, then you're nothing but an effing rat. I got bond. I went home and I don't know what to do. I don't even have a car. I just lost about $80,000, $90,000 in weed. I spent $40,000 on a wedding, $10,000 on a honeymoon, plus hiring lawyers, bond. I was broke. I was driving a $400 car. I'm painting houses. I'm working, for a friend of mine here, you want to make a couple bucks. I'm working in a little repair shop doing light auto repairs. And it's a friend of mine, Dave Jackson. And Dave was a big yacht broker. I had met him from Sandy Perkoff. When I got busted, Dave calls me on the phone and goes, hey, how you doing? I go, and none of my friends were calling me. I took a poison pill. I said, listen, I'm in big trouble. I'm looking at 25 years. I don't know what's going to happen. Just warn everybody I might have to work for the police. So I didn't want anybody, my friends that I went to high school with, I grew up with, to get busted. So, you know, it's kind of a slick move because then I could try to bust them, but they would never talk to me, right? So the cops go, well, how come you don't talk to him? He won't take my calls. You know, I wanted to, so I took a poison pill. I protected everybody I knew where I grew up. I told them, just tell them all, don't talk to me, kind of. Dave calls me up. I'm like, well, you know, he didn't get the memo. What's he want? He goes, how would you like to work for the DEA? And that's a feds. I got busted state in Ohio. I go, what? I was so nervous about it. I remember my wife was feeding the baby. And I'm like looking over. I didn't want, you know, I was like turning my head. I go, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, meet me at the Floridian. The Floridian's a restaurant that's been on Las Olas Boulevard in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Like, and he starts telling me about working for the DEA. And I go, well, why are you getting involved? Why are you telling me this? He goes, well, Kenny, it's kind of strange. If you do bust people and you do good, I get credit for it. I drive up there. There are the arresting head officer of the Lorain County Drug Task Force, his right-hand guy. I ended up getting recruited by him and Dave Jackson also, and another guy that he had, this guy called Sabo in the book. And we ended up doing some of the biggest, you know, I had to bring my own, you know, my own cases. But I never did any of my friends. One guy, the only guy I ever busted that I knew personally, a guy I used to race cars with, his father, who I knew was just, he had done time with my friend Frankie Montleone. You know, now I got busted. I tell him, Tom, I've been busted. You know, I'm working for the cops. And he goes, okay, great, but I have 125 pounds to sell. You want to do it? You know, I'm working out of Jamaica and I got this weed. I go, why is he telling me this? Like now I'm kind of like, is he testing me? I ended up busting him. He never got any time. He was an older man. I mean, he was crazy. People come up and go, hey, prisoners were coming up to me, listen, you're looking at 25 years. I know this guy in Detroit. They're looking for him. He's on the run. He beat me out of a drug deal. I can't get even with him. Here's his name and phone number. And I give it to the cops and they got him. I'm like, that's crazy. We start putting this dream team together and we were this little dream team and they would send us out like, because I had the chops. A DEA agent can only play it so real. I was there for my whole life. Like I could say, okay, remember when we got the red and orange buds and they were coming in the Marlboro and the Parliament boxes, or remember when the kilos were wrapped in duct tape and then they were in plaster and the, you know, Carla, you know, I knew things from a lifetime of doing it that I could sit down with another drug dealer. One thing about being in the business is even to this day, if I go into a restaurant, I'm looking at every face. I'm not sitting with my back to the door unless whoever I'm with has a gun. That way they can look at my back. I can't help it. You know, I either it's the DEA thing. It's been a drug dealer my whole life. I'll know I'm scanning them at all times. That's why they needed me, because I could go sit and talk a drug deal with a drug dealer and I knew every intricate, we could talk about history and times and product that, you know, only another drug dealer would know. There's a lot of stories in the book, you know, about the deals. And I go into a lot of detail about the DEA, how it works. You know, how you get wired up, mics. I literally, like in the movies, had the guy taping mics all over me and all that stuff. The one I used, this is bigger than the one I used. And the other one's half that size. I would have that hidden on my body. We did some, you know, major cases. The last case was the 10,000 kilos of cocaine, if I remember correctly, 5 or 10,000 kilos. And I wasn't the snitch on it. I wasn't the CI. CI is a confidential informant. The Canadian mafia, the Hells Angels, the Irish mafia, and this other motorcycle gang, they were trying to buy the kilos of coke from, and these are bad guys. The one guy had a machine gun in a briefcase. You know, he got pulled over with hand grenades. He had killed 14 people. There's a thing called the reverse sting, which is legal in America, but not legal in Canada, where you tell the drug dealer that you're selling the drugs to him, right? It's called, and it's a conspiracy. It doesn't matter if you ever touch the drugs, just talking about it and, you know, giving money, doing some transaction. The buyers in Canada think that Captain Bobby and our team had just smuggled in, we're big cocaine smugglers, but we're not. The one thing about the cops is they never run out of drugs to sell because they just put it back in the warehouse. I'll tell you how big this case was. Sabo and I went up there. All the cops came up. They had a Learjet they flew up with the brass from all. They brought the cops from Ohio over because Captain Bobby wanted me to get, cred for the case in Ohio. We flew in a C-111 cargo plane with 3 cars in it, and each car had a secret compartment that held 100 kilos of coke. So there was 300 kilos of cocaine. And we do this whole dog and pony show. They bring me into a room. There's like 25, I've had this before, blackboard, whiteboard session, everybody drawing. There's cops from Ohio. There's cops from Vermont. There's cops from Canada. There's the DEA from Florida, the DEA from here, the Royal Canadian Police. And I come in, and I'm not a very tall guy. I admit I'm short. And they bring me in this circle of like 25 or 30 cops. And they go, this is one of our CIs. This is, and I'm wearing a brown leather jacket and a baseball cap so that, you want to wear what you're going to wear so they know who you are. And one of the cops goes, I hear him say, that's him? He's so short. So, what my response was? Shoot high. It took a couple tries. We brought the coke up. Can you imagine bringing all these people up there? A C-111 cargo plane, 3 cars in the plane. It's a military, the Air National, and then the plane has surveillance equipment. So the military plane circling, Vermont to where it was the Canadian border because they came in from Canada. We came up, but they didn't bring the money. So the deal didn't go down. So we go back down, and I didn't go back up the second time. They went up the second time. They agreed to do the deal. And then they finally fly $500,000 down to Jacksonville. And that ends up arresting the guy with the money, arresting the people in Canada. That was probably one of the largest cocaine busts in history at the time. Oh. And I got credit for it. I honestly didn't originate it. I certainly was standing too close to it. You're not talking about some pot guys from Florida, Hell's Angels, Italian Mafia, Irish Mafia, another motorcycle gang, and that's why when I walk into a restaurant, I look over my shoulders. After all that, I ended up going to court and they gave me probation. I don't know why out of all the people, I'm the one that got probation. Dave Jackson, who got busted with no drugs, actually went and got time. He actually got charged for the feds were going to give him 1.5 years. And he was a rich guy. I mean, he was gone through, he was broke now, taking this, and he ended up himself because he couldn't take it. He had 2 kids and a wife, and he was, this rich guy and a big, and I guess he couldn't take his fall from grace. He also had a $2 million or $1 million insurance policy. I guess he figured. And Sabo got involved after Captain Bobby retired. He got involved with a customs guy who was doing a sting out of Jamaica for a load of weed, got busted, and the customs guy backstabbed and said he didn't know anything about it. And Sabo ended up doing 22 years in jail. Somebody asked me the other day, do I have any regrets? Is that a question that's on your mind?
Do you have any regrets? It looks like a no.
Well, here's the thing. I've always taught my kids certain emotions, greed, jealousy, they're wasted emotions. Yeah, right. And regret is the biggest wasted emotion because you can never go back. But I wish I would have done things different. I wish I hadn't had learning disabilities. I wish I have profound dyslexia. 20 to 25% of the people in America have profound dyslexia. 50% of the prison population does. I have ADHD. Similar numbers of prisoners have ADHD. I came from a good family. All of us came from my one friend's dad was the head of the police department. We were all good kids. We weren't doing it for the money. It was because it was like being at Palo Alto in 1974 or the San Francisco gold rush in 1849. We were in ground zero of the drug wars and it all just exploded. And we were the young little soldiers that ended up being part of the process. And not everybody, other people, and a lot of people quit at 18, went to college, became doctors, lawyers. So I don't have any regrets, but I wish I wasn't so reactive. My whole life I've been in survival mode. I've never had a plan. I was never proactive. I was like a pinball, boom, 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 running from the cops at 18 or 19, smuggle a load of drugs, do this, I've never had a plan. And now I hate to admit it, but I'm 67. I have a beautiful wife. My 2 younger kids have grown up to be amazing children, adults. My 2 bonus boys from my wife's side are phenomenal. We live in a beautiful home. I have two doggy, couple old cars that are really cool, and I make a decent living. I got a lot of love in my life, so I guess this is where I'm supposed to be. No
Wow.
regrets. No regrets. I'll tell you something interesting. My daughter, my little 1.5-year-old daughter, did all that. My wife got pregnant while I was in the middle of all this. Like, she is a doctor on staff at a hospital taking care of the good people of Ohio, not far from where I got busted. So how funny is that? They let me go home. They're not funny, but like, God, the universe, they let me go home. I saved my daughter from her drug addicted mother. And now she's a doctor giving back to the exact community that let me come home.
Wow.
Right. And my son is doing great in corporate America. At this day, right now, he's considering going into law enforcement.
All connected. Meant to
Yeah.
be.
But I'm proud of the book. I mean, it got picked as a top true crime, curated by Amazon critics. It's got a lot of great reviews. It's not just my story, though. It's the story of kids. But when I'm in court and I'm black and brown kids chained up next to me going to trial that aren't going to get out. They're going to get time because they don't have the money for a real lawyer, or they don't have, or they're being, there's quid pro quos doing that, that I'm just saying, life isn't fair, and it's unfair that I got out and other people didn't, but I worked hard at it. I'm more cunning. I'm more, resourceful, and I'm just got lucky.
I know, I think in the other interview you said you're very spiritual, which I love that. What do you think if your higher self was to tell you was the whole lesson of this life?
To do good, to treat people good, to understand that life isn't black and white. It's not simple. It's difficult. I lost my dad at 13. I've seen a lot of other people die on my feet. And I think the blessing was to be where I am today, to raise my kids and to make sure that they have a solid, give back to society, to be one of the good guys. I am very spiritual. My wife and I are very spiritual. So I survived 2 open heart surgeries. I almost had 2. I was with less than 2 weeks to live before they found out I needed heart surgery the first time.
Wow.
I've had another major open heart surgery, valve replacement. I had an infection on my heart. I've had other multiple heart procedures. I've had guns put to my head. I was robbed in my house at armed gunpoint. I've had other times I've had guns put to me. I have a pacemaker right now. You can kind of see it right there in my chest. I'm not this good by myself. Somebody once said to me, they go, man, you're the luckiest guy alive. I've never seen, and he didn't know half my story. He knew a little bit of it. And he said, the law of averages says that sooner or later your number's going to come up. There's no way that you can pull off every time you come out on top. He goes, the law of averages is against you. I'm a numbers guy. 1 open heart surgery in a life, 15 years ago, and I'm still coming out not on top. I'm never getting the brass ring. I'm always struggling. There's got to be a higher power. I'm not this good. I couldn't do this by myself. Is it my dad in heaven? God? I don't know if it's learned, if we hear it, we want to believe, or is it that we all put out, this is an energy. The earth puts out energy. We put out energy, and we're all interconnected in that energy somehow. And it builds us. Or is there the big guy in heaven? I don't have to quantify it or qualify it. I just know there's a higher power, and that's the
last question I had was, did you enjoy working for the DEA as much as you kind of got that high from doing the other side?
I worked hard for the DEA. Yeah, I did a good job. They asked me one time after I was with my family working a legitimate job, I get a phone call occasionally. Hey, come on back. We need you. Come on up here. Let's see what we can put together. I go, nah. I've got 2 kids. I'm out, man. I busted a guy with 200 kilos of hash from, that's in the book. And again, I never met the guy before in my life. Somehow it landed on my lap. I felt bad. Someone called me. Hey, I got a guy in town. Guy from Europe came in. What are you doing here? I knew a guy in Europe that came to visit. He goes, oh, I got 200 kilos of hash coming. And I'm like, wish you never would have told me that, because what am I going to do now?
Wow. You do feel bad, I guess, like human emotions.
Yeah, I feel bad to this day.
Wow.
I feel bad. Look, I was raised in what I'll call the cowboy way. Back in the 60s, the only thing on TV was old Westerns. So you don't lie, you don't steal, you don't cheat, you don't mess with another man's woman, you don't throw the first punch, and you don't steal a man's horse. There's all these rules. Not one of them was don't snitch or be a rat. But growing up, if you're in the playground and you're like 5 or 7 years old and you get in trouble and you and your friend get called to the teacher's office or the principal's office, you're supposed to both keep your mouth shut. You're not supposed to rat out the other guy. I broke a covenant that I was convinced my whole life I would never do. I never thought I would do that. And it does, as much as I have bravado about it and I talk about, oh yeah, we busted this guy and we did that. And in the book, when you read it, you kind of hear me saying, I call it, and then I switch to the dark side. Well, that's the legal side. The dark side was what you're in, but in my mind, it's the dark side. But I noticed when I wrote it, I was kind of like glib about it all. But I'll just tell you, it's never sat well with me. It's never sat well with me. And I have to tell you, if that same choice came up today, if something happened, I don't know if I could do it again.
Wow.
I have a beautiful wife that loves me. I have bad heart. I have a lot of things, but I always say, I don't know if I could rat again. I might have to just do the time.
Really? Wow.
I can't be that same guy twice. The
Wow.
first time I did it was to save my daughter and, to try to fix my family. People still don't talk to me today. I actually have people, I wrote the book and I've had friends of mine, XY, whatever, they go, they're on Facebook. Oh yeah, promote my book. They go, oh yeah, but weren't you a rat? And I go, it's in the book. If you really want to know what happened, if you really don't, because it's all rumors, I never ratted out anybody in my Fort Lauderdale Hollywood group.
Wow, I love your story because it's just so confusing because there's no right or wrong, honestly, at the end of the day.
No.
And the position you were in, and you still feeling that kind of, like you said, the guilt of ratting other people, not really ratting, but working for the other side. Yeah. It's just confusing, but you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, no regrets.
Yeah, how are you moving forward with your life now?
So, I'm just working and enjoying my beautiful wife. We're empty nesters. I wrote the book. I'm going to try to step into your world, contemplating doing a podcast called One Step Over the Line, about people that have taken one step over the line, whether good or bad. Is it Mark Zuckerberg who quit Harvard to start Facebook? Or is it another story like mine? As I say at the end of the book, show me a life without skeletons in the closet and I'll show you a liar or a life unlived. Everybody has a story. There's the book. So that picture there is when I'm working for the DEA.
Oh.
And that was just taken by my wife at some point or somebody. But that's the cover. I really thank you so much for allowing me to share it and so much for sharing your time with me.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that everybody watching learned a lot because I learned so much just in this 2 hours. And I can't wait to see your podcast and your book and movie maybe one day to just grow.
I hope.
I hope you guys enjoyed that and learned a lot from his story. I think one of my favorite part was asking him if he regretted or not. Did he feel guilty becoming an informant? It definitely brings a whole new perspective, and there's a lot that I learned from this interview. Once again, if you guys are interested in his book, One Step Over the Line, there is even crazier stories that he goes into detail. You guys could download it on your iPad as well in the PDF version, so I'll leave the link down below. Thank you so much to Mr. Ken Behr, and see you guys on my next video.